From February 2024 to May 2025, a lot of work has been done on Temptress. Let's take a look. In this video, we'll be adding the starboard and port side fillers, vertical beams, and the keel pad to the transom. Properly positioning the transom on the strongback was an important prerequisite to this video. In the workshop, I cut out the filler using Shaper Origin. With this method, my fillers fit really well. Next, I mark and cut the keel pad. Now it's time to permanently bond with epoxy. I coat the mating surfaces of the transom frame with thickened epoxy as well. And then place the fillers and the vertical beams. I use a vertical laser line to help position the keel pad and the king beam at the center of the boat. For a better view of the process, I mounted the camera on frame 12. Over the past few weeks, I've added 5 support frames to strengthen and stiffen up the strongback. In this video, I'll be permanently bonding the transom and all 13 frames to the stringers. I start at the back of the boat with frames 12, 13, and the transom. Within the stringer notches, I wet the end grain with unthickened epoxy. I also add thickened epoxy to the frame where it will fit into the stringer notch. With the laser level in place to mark the center of the transom and the water lines from below, I make sure that the transom is properly positioned on the strongback. To ensure the frames are center onto the strongback, I dry fit the keel into the keel slots. In addition to the water line, I adjust the height of the frames using a level across frames 10 through 13 because they're all supposed to be level. In hindsight, one thing I need to do is I actually need to bond this frame to the bulkhead. And this is my first time bonding a frame to a bulkhead. So I'm going to coat this too. So this is just a much thicker epoxy that I've put together here with the goal that it will really fill the gap. I've got some big gaps here. I'm not the best woodworker in the world. For that, I'm not the best YouTuber in the world either. I like to put these keels in here just to make sure I got things pretty straight. I have a huge gap here. That's the kind of carpentry you don't see in other boat building shows. To ensure that I have a tight fit Between the frame and the bulkhead, I'm using a combination of clamps and silicon bronze screws. And we've completed bonding all the frames and the transom to the stringers. With all the frames permanently bonded to the stringers, in this video we'll be shaping and permanently bonding the stem. To mark the intersection of the stem and the keel, I put a wooden batten into the keel slot. And then mark the trim line. To mark the front profile of the stem, I load up the template design in Shaper Studio. But now that I'm a big-time YouTube influencer, I outsource the template cutting to a father-daughter duo. I mount the template jig flush to the stem jig and draw the trim line. I cut the stem profile on a bandsaw. As you may have guessed, this was not my best idea. Next, I cut the front profile. Next, I install the first board in the keel. April 8th, 2024, along a narrow path across North America, people witnessed something that will not occur again in my lifetime. My bonding of the Temptress keel.
I'm very excited. I'm looking up when I can.
Oh, it's so close.
It's getting very dark right now.
See the
very dark. You can see the shadow going across.
This is the start of it. It's dark over here. It's light over there.
This is
The shadow's
amazing.
coming.
Crowds are going nuts. We're about to get word
Venus.
that we're
That's
at total.
Venus.
Oh, you can see the planets. The crowds are going nuts. This is crazy. Bob,
Oh my
this is
God.
amazing.
Here we go.
Don't look at the
Close.
sun yet. It's
Real
not quite
close.
totality, but you can still see some of the planets right away.
Very close. You got about 15
And the crowd
seconds.
is very happy.
shadow bands.
Oh, total darkness here. This is incredible. Oh, wow.
There it is.
There
Diamond
it is.
ring.
Diamond ring.
Diamond
wow,
ring.
it's amazing.
Hold
It's
the
amazing.
filter.
That is awesome. Look at that. Oh, and Bob, that's amazing.
Wow. Jupiter.
Complete totality. I see Jupiter.
Oh my gosh, that is gorgeous.
Wow, this is amazing, Bob.
Looking at the 3D model, we see that shaping the stringers is really just about following the natural curves that the frames have designed. So this video is less about technique and more about picking the right tool. The power planer was just the right tool. Now let's get to work. What I'm going to do is just start with a batten and then come across and put it on the stringers. On the frames and just mark it. Oops. Perhaps too aggressive with the power planer, but I'm confident we can fix that later with fairing and extra epoxy. Welcome back. In this video, I shaped the keel to the boat. And for the Here is where I begin to deviate from Dan Lee. What I start to do is rough power plane the keel so that at every frame the keel is only 3/4 inch or less above the frame surface. At this point, I've gone about as far as I'm comfortable with the power planer. And as you get to the point, I keep losing my center pencil line. So what I've done is I've put a vertical laser down the center of the boat from the stem all the way to the stern. And as you can see, I'm close, but I don't perfectly have the center line. So I'm going to use a belt sander now. At this point, I'm satisfied with the shape and the center line of the keel. In this two-part video, I will be notching and installing the chine top rails. I first make a jig that allows me to mark the notches on each of the frames. By placing the jig along the side of each frame at the chine flat, I can trace the notch that needs to be cut out of each frame to accommodate the top rail. I always make this mark on the aft side of the frame. What will ultimately happen here is when I put the chine top rail in place, it should overhang the edge of each frame by 1/4 inch. The same will be true of the side battens. Cutting out the notches is pretty straightforward here at the back of the boat. When you notch the frames at the front of the boat, you need to angle your cuts towards the next frame in front of it, both vertically and horizontally. In this video, we bond the chine top rail. So what I'm going to do here to start this video is I'm going to dry fit these chine top rail components into the notches all the way down the boat. I have a 7/8 inch square piece, and then on top of that I'm going to put a batten or a board that is 7/8 inches wide but 11/16 tall. So when I put these together, this is now 1 9/16 inches tall. And then on this outside, what I'll do is I will put this top rail on here like this. And then I'm going to work my way down this boat, clamping things in. Now I'm going to bond the first 7/8 inch by 7/8 inch square batten or component of the top rail into the slots. So what I'm going to do is wet each of these notches with neat or unthickened epoxy just to let it soak in. So now that the first component of the chine top rail has been installed, I'm going to go ahead and I want to put the other ones on, but I got to clean up this epoxy so everything will fit nice and tight. So I'm going to clean up the extra epoxy with this sander. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the 3/4 inch by 11/16 inch top rail component and put it on top of the one that's already bonded in place. And the reason this is so nice is now I have a good sturdy connection to bond everything. So I'm going to put this one on, and then I'll take this one and put it on the outside edge so I have a nice smooth outside edge. So now I just paint the outside edge here with thickened epoxy. In this video, I'll be installing the first of the 3 laminates that make up the chines. So now what I'm going to do is use my router with this bit here, and this bit has a roller at the bottom, so it will cut the chine parallel or right at the edge of the chine top rails. In this video, I add the second and third layers of the chine, and I get things pretty well fared so that in the next video, I can add the chine top rail. And as you can see, Temptress is getting pretty sturdy at this point. After installing the first chine laminate, I took a belt sander to the top of it to remove any excess epoxy. Then I coated the plywood components with unthickened epoxy. I spread the epoxy with the smallest notches on the West System spreader. For the remainder of this video, I install the third layer of the chine laminate with an aerial view. I finished up the chines with a belt sander, but to ensure that I didn't sand the chine top rail, I marked the bottom edge with a pencil. As we finish, let's take a few last looks at the completed chines. So here I'm going to install the chine bottom rails. And what the chine bottom rail really is just a fillet. So when the planks come down, there's a place for them to land. I'm using 2 boards to make up the chine bottom rail. Let me try to show you what I have going on here with this chine bottom rail. I'm really just trying to make a fillet, and as you can see, it's going to start off thick at a high angle, and then there's really not much need for it down at the back here. So I'm just piecing together boards. I just have them put in place right now, and by the time I get to the back of this boat, it's really going to go down to almost nothing. While I'm only showing the application of the thickened epoxy, I did coat both sides with unthickened epoxy first. After the epoxy cured overnight, I broke the laminate. There's still some additional sanding and shaping, but I decided to abandon this method and shape it after being bonded onto the chine. I attempted to finish the shaping of the chine bottom rail and some of the frames with the belt sander. This turned out to be a lot more difficult than I had planned.
One often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it.
And in my case, I'd been avoiding using the hand planes. But no more. I used the rebate plane where the chine bottom rail meets the chine laminates. And a large hand plane to shape the chine bottom rail to the frames. The rebate plane turned out to be the perfect tool to plane the edge right between the chine bottom rail and the chine laminate. Let's take one final look at the port side chine bottom rail, planed to perfection. Due to the shape of the boat, I cut the limber holes 3 different ways. While I'm paused on the shear clamp, I decided to work on the bottom top side batten. On this model, you can really start to see the shape of Temptress with the side battens on. For the top side battens, I ordered some 5/8 inch thick African mahogany and ripped it 1.5 inches wide. For my scarf joints, I built a safer jig. What I'm trying to do is just get this board aligned to that 1/2 inch mark. And I want to put a nail in here and then I can align it in the back and just mark out where all these top side rails will go. in the model I could tell you that on frame 1, 2, 3, this butts right up to the top chine rail. So it gets narrowed down up to the stem. And then there's a nice even gap here, all the way to the back of the boat. And on frame 12, it meets up again. So I'm going to mark this out, and then I'm going to cut the slots to install this first topside batten. Okay, that's pretty good. In Temptress builds 67 and 68, I actually learned a much better way to cut out these notches. So one thing I need to figure out is how deep I need to notch into this stem so that this 5/8 thick batten will kind of go parallel to the stem. And as you know, I'm not much of a woodworker, but I am a huge mathematical nerd. We know the front of the stem converges at a 70-degree angle. And therefore, we know that the topside batten will connect with the stem at a 35-degree angle. And with a bit of trigonometry, we know that the stem will be notched 1 inch up into the side. So when I put this batten in here, I now know that I have to notch it out about 1 inch deep is where this happens. So I come right to the edge here. That's where I start my notch. And the idea is I'm going to notch in and bring it pretty close to the front. And I'll taper my batten so that right here at that 1 inch mark, it's full thickness, and it gets thinner as it moves forward. And a bit more trigonometry tells us that the taper should be 10 degrees. I cut the outline of the notch with a handsaw. Next, I notch out the stem with a chisel. Then I try to put the real piece in. Boy, that's hard to fit. It actually fits pretty well. I continue to dry fit the topside batten. So with this first topside batten, I haven't bonded it in yet, but I just want you to see what it looks like coming down the side of the boat, and then it comes all the way up into the stem that I carved out with a chisel. I'm starting at the front, and I drew a line both on the stem and on my batten so that I would get them put into the right spot. Now, I just let the epoxy cure overnight in the heated garage. Welcome back. In this video, I'm finally getting on with the shear clamps. And what I'll specifically be doing is cutting and bonding the CNC shaped shear clamps. Back in Temptress build 55, I had a failed attempt at creating the shear clamps out of straight timbers that I was trying to bend to shape. To improve upon the process and the design, Dan Lee redesigned the shear clamp to be made of CNC shaped components. I uploaded the DXF files into Shaper Studio and cut out the parts using the Shaper Origin. It took me 3 passes to cut out each part. Here is just another view of me cutting out the components with the Shaper Origin, but this time replayed at 8x speed. But let's be honest, you're not here to watch me cut out boards. This channel is famous for one thing and one thing alone: bonding boards together with thickened epoxy. And the first step to bonding is laying out all of the components on a large, flat surface. And then I use epoxy thickened with colloidal silica. In this video, I finish cutting and joining each of the components of the shear clamps. And then I bond all 3 layers together, dry formed, to the top of the boat. After a few days away on travel, I move the components out to the garage. Next, I position the 3 components onto the frames. I need to notch the stem up 1 3/4 inches thick, which is the thickness of what this laminate will be. The stem laminate was bonded with epoxy thickened with high density filler, so cutting through is always more challenging than I expect. Now it's time to clean up my scarf joints from the excess epoxy. I coat each surface with unthickened epoxy. Followed by epoxy thickened with high density filler. Let's take one last look at the port side shear clamp formed to the shape of the boat. Now that I have all 3 layers bonded together, I need to shape them appropriate to this lamination. And I'm going to go from that point there, hit all of these inside edges and mark that off. Here at the back of the boat, to make sure I don't go too far on the top outer edge, I've put a red colored pencil, so that will help me make sure I don't power plane too far. And then when I move to the front of the boat, things start going the opposite way. I put the red colored pencil on the bottom here, or which will be the top, so that when I sand off or I power plane this off, I don't take off that edge. Depending on how much material I wanted to remove, I adjusted the depth anywhere from 1/16 to 1/32 of an inch. Now you can see what the shear clamp looks like as I've beveled it from the back all the way to the front. I'm going to start notching each of the frames to fit the shaped shear clamp in. I'm on frame 2. What I want you to see is that the width of the top of this shear clamp parallel to the frame is 1 inch. And I want this shear clamp to overhang the side of this frame by 1/4 inch. So I need to notch this way by 3/4 of an inch. And as we said before, this should be 1.5 inches. So now I just try to pop it in. So now I'm going to come in and I'm going to start using my oscillating tool to cut out to the back of the frame so I can start pushing this in a little bit tighter. And I'm comfortable with where I'm at as far as the in and out of this shear clamp. The next thing I'm going to work on here is, as you look at it vertically, at the back of the boat it starts curving back up. The shear clamp coming in, I need to go ahead and trim up the angle. Yeah, that's way better. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good here. I'm now ready to bond the shear clamp. And you can see here I put a screw. I'm gonna use a silicone bronze screw to help it up here at the stem. And got the shear clamp dry clamped in along the way. Then I'll come in and let's do the thickened epoxy. Now I'm going to repeat the process and start taking things off down the backside. Let's take one last look at the shear clamp as it is clamped up to cure overnight. And then at the finished shear clamp the next morning. And now I'm off to snow globe. Welcome to this first of 2 videos where I believe I have found the fastest way to bond the topside battens. While I had several days of prep, the majority of the work was completed in 2 days with the help of an old friend. But as every parent knows, Santa's big day requires a lot of preparation. To save time, I purchased the 12-foot long, 1.5 inch wide by 5/8 inch thick battens, pre-cut from the lumberyard. And then I routed a 1/4 inch round on the 2 inside edges of the batten. To make 28-foot battens, I cut the boards to length and then made scarf joints to put 3 pieces together. Okay, so I scarf jointed and bonded the 8 battens that are remaining to complete both sides of the boat. So now that I have the upper and lowermost topside battens installed, I'm going to put 4 more battens equally spaced on each frame. Next, I do the same markings on the stem. And then I notch out the stem.
So I'm just going to notch out 1, 2, 3, 4 notches. I'm just going to use my handsaw method.
I then clamp the battens on the upper and the lower edges of each of the notches that I marked.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the saw blade depth so that it cuts 3/8 of an inch on the aft side. And when I run it along here, it's going to be a much deeper cut on the forward side.
Here we see the starboard side of the boat with all the notches cut out.
It's the plywood that sucks. Sorry, America.
Don't worry, I'll play music over it.
With the 2 of us working together, placing the batten guides was much faster. This time, to split the battens at the front of the boat, I borrowed a friend's bandsaw. After cutting the notches on each frame, the transom and the stem, the rest of the process is quite simple. We add unthickened and thickened epoxy into each notch. We put unthickened epoxy on the inside edge of the batten and place the batten inside of the notches, clamping them temporarily. And then secure the battens to each frame using silicone bronze screws. Let's take one last look at the starboard side battens. Till next time, cheers.